If you're thinking of making a career change, you're in the right place. I'm Yesim Nicholson, and Your Big Career Move is your opportunity to listen to stories from ordinary people who've made extraordinary career changes. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and if you feel inspired to make your own career change, but you're not quite sure where to start, why not buy my book, Ready to Quit Your Job, or join my next career coaching program, both of which you can find at yescareercoaching.com. Normally, I ask my guests what they were doing before their career change, but of course, for you, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Because you haven't
Yeah,
made a complete change. So, should we talk about your hobby career, and then we
sure.
can talk about how you fit that in around your, let's say, real career in inverted commas?
Yeah, totally. So I perform stand-up comedy, and that's something that generally happens at night, which doesn't, in a way, get in the way of any other standard career, I suppose. That's during, quote unquote, banker's hours or in IT. Those hours are very different and have looked very different. I started performing about 5 years ago, and I have gone overboard and performed like 5 or 6 nights a week because there's kind of an opportunity to just kind of perform in different ways every night. Like if you want to go to these gigs called a bringer gig where you have to bring someone in order to perform, or in other cities, not in London, but like in the States, you can do pay to play kind of stuff. And so there's ways to get on stage every night if you want to. They're not always quality ways, but they're ways.
So, when you say
And
bring somebody, is that somebody that then has to stand on stage too, or can they
no,
sit
they just
next
have
to
to
you?
sit and watch.
Okay.
But it's still, I mean, look, I'm in my mid 40s. I value my friendships more than there are two things I want to ask my friends to do anymore. One's help me move,
Mm-hmm.
and another one is like I won't ask them very often to go to a gig so I can be on stage.
Why?
I
Because
won't say I'll
that's
never
just
do it.
one too many times already.
Right. And you just kind of value your friendships differently. You know, people don't necessarily have the time to just sit and watch 15 comics go on stage so you can do 5 minutes. So it's hard with those kind of gigs because it's kind of like the promoter could, get an audience, or they can make the acts bring an audience, and then there's an audience, and it's kind of a weird, weird thing.
I mean,
Um,
as friend requests go, though, I don't know. I mean, I think uh, being asked by a good friend to come and sit and have a laugh, probably not the worst thing. I
Not the
mean,
worst,
helping you
but
move house, I'd probably be less on board with that. But come and watch you perform, awesome. Oh
yeah. So
yeah, so
I,
you were saying about people, your friends coming to watch you perform.
well, yeah, it just gets old, and you get tired of asking, and it's like when you have a really important gig that you want people at, and the last, like, there's certain friends where I don't want my only interaction with them to be because they're going to my gig. I want to actually like nurture the friendship more than that. And so for me, it just feels very transactional at some point. Like if that's the only interaction you have with someone is, oh, will you go to my gig? And they're like, yeah. And then you don't see them otherwise. And I've seen other comics that say their friends are kind of like done. And so that's kind of what happens to us early on because we want to get on stage and everything, but then there's this cost to it. And it seems like an unfair cost. Like it's kind of like do your job and get an audience for your gig that
Yeah.
I'm performing at. There's one particular person who it's a gig where you have to bring someone, and then on the way out the door, you're guilted into paying as well.
Wow.
So it's that kind of thing, right? So anyway, that's just a weird side of it that you just eventually go, okay, what's my goal? And like, is that getting me towards my goal? And when it's not anymore, you don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of. So I would say more recently I'm gigging still a couple of times a week, but like trying to work on making it meaningful where it's either a new material night where I can really try new stuff and feel comfortable, like I'm trusted by whoever's running it, that they're like, yeah, go ahead, or
Hmm.
it's a night that's just really I know is going to be really good and like have an audience where I can really kind of keep building on my skill set.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times I'll just practice at home, and
In
that's
front
a
of the
bit
mirror.
I think I'm funny, so it works.
That's all that matters. Do you like throw
Yeah.
roses at yourself and things?
Yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah.
tomatoes. It's a mess in my room. But yeah, it's so yeah, it's just it's like it's weird because when I first did it, my goal was to do it one time, and then I did it for 5 years or 4.5 years now. And
So
so
why? Like where I once read somewhere ages and ages ago, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I'll regurgitate it as if it is true, that all men at some point in their lives want to be a stand-up comedian.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah.
what made you want to try stand-up comedy? Because
Yeah.
most people, that is like probably the scariest thing you could ever do is stand on a stage and try to make people laugh.
Yeah, people say that, and they're often people with kids, and I'm like, that is scary. Like that is scary. Having a baby, that to me is scary. So I'm like, I'm just on stage, you know. But I mean, there are a lot of scary things people do. Um, you know, they commit to each other. Like there's things people do that are scary that I've
This is
avoided
true.
up to
This
this
is
point.
true. So what was
But
it about the comedy that you were like, yeah,
well,
I'm gonna do that?
you know, it started out as like a thing where I've used humor, and through therapy, I found out even more about where I've used humor in my life, and especially when you look at self-deprecation, which I've kind of gotten I do it in a healthy way, I'd say now, where I'm not totally putting myself down, but I'm more seeing the joke in my participation in something, or the joke in me being in what I in my point of view. But I think I've always used humor either to connect with people. I think one of the quickest ways to build connection with someone is to make them laugh, because it's a vulnerable thing to do, laughing. People look at crying as very vulnerable, and I think crying is vulnerable. I think laughing is too, because you're still basically it's an expression of an emotion that's kind of outward. It's not a thought, it's an actual thing that happens. And so I think, you know, you can share a moment with someone where they laugh and it's pretty cool. But I've always just made people laugh. I've always kind of been quick-witted, I'd say, with just comments or something. And so friends, I mean, I'm the funny one, right?
Hmm.
Like in my friend groups usually, except for in comic friend groups, that's tricky. You know, you're all funny. But it's kind of like when you're really good in high school and then you go to college, you go to like university and you find out everyone's really smart and you're not that smart kind of thing. Yeah, so basically people would say, "Oh, you should do stand up. Why don't you do stand up?" And I would just say, "Oh yeah, I'll do it by the time I'm 40. Oh yeah, that's my goal for when I turn 40." And I just said it enough where it became kind of a thing,
So
like,
did you
but my
mean it
mind
when you were
wasn't
saying
happy.
it, or were you just like, was
Well,
it
I
just a
always wanted
throwaway
to.
comment?
No, I wanted to, but a lot of stuff happened in my 20s, and that made me think, for whatever reason, I wasn't gonna do things that really made me happy. Writing. I I wanted to write. I mean, I went back quite a ways, and even in college, like I majored in political science. I wanted to major in writing, but I just was too scared. And so I just did what I thought was the safe thing, like, oh, I'm
Mm.
gonna be a lawyer, which I wasn't gonna be a lawyer in the end. I didn't do that, but like I thought I'm gonna do this path that's gonna be safe and gonna be like what I understood to be success and everything. And then, but I still loved the writing and I still loved all that. But I didn't even know anyone in my family who did that. My uncle did. He died when I was like 19 or 20. So he was the closest thing to that creative person in my family that I knew. And um I just didn't have the guts to do it. And then with comedy, I tried to take acting in college, and then I did writing. I actually ended up doing an extra year at university because I spent so much time doing other courses. That was a waste of money, but you know, but I guess the thing was I wasn't comfortable enough in my body to be on stage. I thought I thought, oh, I'm too fat. No one's gonna want to see me on stage and things like that, that I had to really like figure it out at some point up until
Mm.
even now, right? Because you have those days, or I have those days where I look in the mirror and I don't like what I see. And I'm like, and I have to go on stage. And that kept me from doing it for a long time. And then some other things that I just said, well, I don't deserve this and stuff. And it's really, but that I don't talk about that often because it's kind of like not a very nice thing to do to yourself. But I think there are things that stop a lot of people from dreaming, you know?
Definitely.
And
We're very
so
good at sabotaging ourselves, for sure.
yeah, and I did. And I remember the moment I was seeing Elton John at British Summertime, and I saw the drummer Ray Cooper just having a blast. And I've seen him like, I mean, I saw Elton John like over 50 times. And so I've seen this guy on tour many times, like just not Nigel, but his other drummer, and just having a blast and having the best time. And I looked at that and I'm like, that's what I want. And I told my friend, I said, I want to do comedy. And I started crying. And it was like this crazy thing of like, I've been doing it for a couple years, but I want to do it. and that's why I'm doing it. And I think that that was just like me being brave to admit I wanted to do it. So I don't think the bravery is me getting on stage. I think the bravery is just for me, how it looks for me is me admitting I want to do it and then doing it because of that. Because that took a
Where
lot.
did the voice come from that was saying to you, you don't deserve to do this, or you're not the right shape to do it, or whatever? Like, where was that voice coming from?
Well, I just I don't know. I mean, I've dealt with depression a lot. I mean, I know a lot of performers and stuff do that, and I have and I do. And I think I just kind of decided that because of certain things that had happened. I lost my brother. He passed away. I didn't like lose him. I know where he is. He died when I was like 15 years ago, and that was a big thing. And that was after college, but that was one where I just said, well, like I have to do like I'm not going to be happy now. How can I be?
Mm,
And that was a big one. Um, that did it to me. And I was upset with myself for not for it's all illogical and it's not rational, but it was just like a feeling like I should have done more to help him. I thought that's not true. I think that's something a lot of people it was an accidental overdose.
right.
And so I punished myself for that.
Mm,
I think all of us in my family dealt with it in different ways, and didn't talk about it certainly. And so that was the thing I did. I punished myself. And I don't usually talk about that. Actually, this is very rare, but there's no other way to talk about it other than to be honest. And so I think that was a big thing. And then I always had body image issues, like just wherever those come from. I think I just the not thinking you're not enough or you're too much, whatever. And I think just I mean, I think therapy is so important. I think with doing a lot of work on myself, I think reading Brene Brown, who's been like this inspiration to me.
hmm.
The Gifts of Imperfection was where my life really changed, I think,
Wow.
about 10 years ago. And over time, just healing those parts of myself and then saying, like, I can actually honor him by making people laugh, because that's what we did all the time.
Mm,
And I can honor other people who I've lost or other parts of myself or my life. And we don't all need to look the same to be on stage. It's boring. And I don't know how much men worry about that. Um, I think some do and some don't, but it's kind of a funny thing because the men, can all look how they look and it's fine. And I feel like for women it's a thing more. But I don't know who that is, who can even be blamed for that. But I just know like I have to be responsible for how I feel about myself and how I carry myself and what that looks like on stage and how I talk about it and everything else. And I think, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it came from all different places, I suppose.
yeah.
But
And it's interesting because a lot of comedians use their physical appearance as a sort
yeah.
of icebreaker, don't they? If
Hmm.
they've got big ears, they'll talk about that in the first
Yeah.
instance, or they're short or whatever. And I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of a great way to just address what everybody might be thinking about them and get
Yeah.
it out of the way.
Yeah. You tell that, like I see it too. Louis Anderson, he was big in like the 80s and then he did TV and stuff too, but he was this large guy and he just calls it out right away. And he goes, like, and he said in one of his bits, one of his sets, he said, people ask me, why do you talk about your weight, Louis? Why do you do that? And he's like, because if I don't, then they're going to be like, do you think he knows? So it was
Love
amazing.
that.
But then what I've learned too is I don't see myself the way other people see me. So
Mm,
I've made jokes before that it's like, wait, that's not, and I've seen it too. I've seen some acts say something about, especially how fat they are. That's a big one. And I'm like, what?
yeah.
Like, first of all, you're thinner than me. So what are you saying? And
Mm,
then it's kind of like, so you have to be
mm,
careful because if the audience doesn't see what you see, it turns into pain. It doesn't
yes.
turn into, and so it's an interesting thing. That's just my opinion. Of course, someone else could say something else, but
Yeah,
I've
but
experienced that where I've said something that was incongruent with what they saw, and I had to go, oh, okay.
yeah,
Funny.
different.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So that pivotal moment where you were like, okay, screw this, I'm just gonna do this comedy
Yeah.
thing that I've been thinking and talking about for so long.
Yeah.
Like from making that decision to making it happen, what did you
Yeah.
have to do?
So I'm someone who I need to take a class. I need to feel bona fide. Like
Hmm.
I need some external validation for some reason that I am okay to do this. So I took a class and there I know a lot of people haven't taken a class. I know a lot of people who have. I think it was helpful for me. I think if I knew more, if I knew what I know now, I definitely tell people you don't have to. If you have the right people around you, you don't have to. But basically the class, it can't make you funny, but it tells you to move the mic out of the way, tells you,
Oh,
you know, how to
it's the
engage.
practical stuff.
Yeah, and then it tells you what the formulas are for jokes.
Okay.
And then if you can write them or not is up to you, you know. And that's where just it change the shift happens. But so for me, I took a 6 week course and then you do a showcase at the end. And that could have been where it ended. And I know that's where it ended for a few people was in class with.
I was
The
going to
showcase
say there
happened.
must have been people in the group that you're like, you might feel
Yeah.
like you want to be a comedian, but you're not funny.
Yeah, and they still do it. Um, and then some of them don't, and some people do it because they want to get better at speaking. Some people do it because someone just gave them a gift certificate. Here you go, and they're like, okay, I'll do it. And some people do it just for people do it for all different reasons, and some people do it because that's what they want to do. And I did it because I had a commitment to get on stage by the time I was 40, and I didn't want to be. I'm it's important to me that I don't lie and that
Mhm.
I keep my word. So that's what I did. But then after that, I just kept doing it. But yeah, it was cool. Did the showcase and one joke that I wrote at that time, I still tell, and it might be the best joke I ever write. I have no idea. But yeah, it was fun. And my friends came and watched and we had a good time. And then I just kept doing open mics from there. And then I ended up moving to London, pretty shortly after. So
So how did that come about?
the
The
London
move?
move.
Yeah.
That's the day job. So I work in IT. I've worked in IT for years. I basically was a project manager and I had come out to I was in Madrid for 3 months, living there while I was working for a client. And then I came out to London basically to rescue a project as a project manager. I spent quite a bit of time over here and um, my company basically just said, "Hey, we're looking for you over there. We can't find you over there. Do you want to go over there?" Kind of thing. Like, we need Rabiah in London, basically. And I had thought about it before, for a different reason, I suppose, at one point, but I always thought it'd be cool to live abroad. At the time, the political situation in the US has been a bit difficult for 8 years or so. And so I just kind of, yeah, let me try it out because I had thought about it before and I enjoyed living in different cities just very briefly. And so it was a great opportunity. Like, when is it going to come up again? I'm already 40, like, and so I said, sure. And so I made the move and then like I moved into my flat the next day was the lockdown. So
Oh,
um,
really?
yeah, that was pretty
Great
crazy.
timing.
Yeah, my timing was not good. I was here for like a month in an Airbnb and then moved into a flat and lockdown happened.
Gosh. So have you found that the comedy scene in the US versus the UK is different? Is it similar?
Well, it's funny because I mean, it's kind of the US being so big. I mean, California is basically the same size as England when you look at population and
Yeah.
everything. So I was in San Diego for a little bit and then I performed in a couple other cities, but just gotten on bills and done it or an open mic. Like a lot of open mics, you just kind of show up and sign up and do it. And so I'd say like the model's a little bit different. Like in New York, I did it. And one of them I just showed up and then they're like, okay, you can have 7 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but it's also like, oh wow, I get 7 minutes. Yeah, amazing. And then they're like, oh, you get six because someone else showed up. Then you get five. Like, all right, no more than five. And then can you wait like another hour because we want to get these other
Oh
people up?
gosh.
you know. And I was like, all right, well, I'm from out of town. I'll just sit here. And then another one I went to, it was like basically you get a spot, but if you bring people, then you get more time. But the people who come and to see you have to pay 25 a ticket plus a 2 drink minimum.
Wow.
So it's like a $50 night out
Yeah.
for you to get to perform. So it's kind of crazy. So that's what I saw in New York. And I know New York people do like 4 or 5 gigs a night, but I heard they're just kind of really rough, like a meat grinder. In San Diego it was a little bit different. Like I would do 2 gigs a night, but I would you just wait. Like you sign up and wait. And you get there early. Like people would sit in the parking lot at 3 p.m. to sign up at 5. Like weird, you
Wow.
know? And then here it's more organized, like ahead of time. So they'll have Google Forms or whatever, and you fill them out, and then you try to get a spot. And some are bringers, and some are not, and it depends. And then in any place you go, there are cliques of people who kind of know each other, and that's their friends. And so, if you're not in one of those, it's hopefully you're liked enough or respected enough to get on. But I'd say it's probably similar but different everywhere. There's like different ways of doing the same thing.
And
And
then,
then
I
as far
mean,
as
this is,
audiences, I
yes.
mean, I have a pretty dry sense of humor, so like that fits pretty well here.
Yeah.
But I think if I came in like really hot, like super American, that would get old. And like also not understanding the language and changing the words and stuff and having an understanding of that. But I haven't really performed enough in other places to know if it's that different. I think you just have to adjust to the place.
Yeah. And I mean, do you have to adjust the comedy as well? Or you just do you?
I mean, I did a little bit. Like so I was just in Edinburgh for a month. And so I was talking about the tube, and generally that's a known concept, the tube, but it might be called the underground or something.
Mm.
And so like a guy I work with, he just said, try it out, be open to switching the language a little bit. And when I'm outside of London, if there's something specific to London that's not really transferable, I won't do it. It doesn't make sense. Or I'll change it a little bit so that like I'm not assuming they have this knowledge of London before I tell the joke, set it up
Yeah.
a little bit differently, I think. And then in the US, like I'm gonna be going to the US for a little like for the holidays, and I want to do a couple of gigs, and I'll probably contrast things a little bit differently like than I do here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Well,
think you need to be aware of where you are and
yeah. And I
context.
don't know, I'm just completely making assumptions here, but I kind of feel like maybe it adds a new and fresh dimension to your comedy,
Yeah.
having lived somewhere else and then being able to bring that into your
Oh, for
storytelling.
sure.
Mm,
Yeah, because I have this whole thing, like my thing is I'm American if I want it to be. Everyone has a thing that's interesting about them that they can exploit if they want, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
And and I do know how Americans are. I do know, a new joke I've written is that, I say the stereotype is that we're really obnoxious. Like Americans are so obnoxious. And honestly, I agree. Like sometimes when I see another American, I'm like, no, I'm Canadian. And but I don't think we're obnoxious. I think our energy levels are normal and we're just not vitamin D deficient. And that's the thing. But it's like just kind of playing on. I know how we are. I know we're louder, whatever, but I also know that you guys are low energy sometimes.
Yeah.
And then there's lads, and they're just a different, or there's hen doos and there's stag doos, and those are
Totally.
different, right? And so it's just kind of this funny thing of like, what's funny about it
Yeah.
and what's different and what's the same.
Yeah. But you also
And
have that thing of, Brits are a certain way in Britain, and as soon as they get on a flight, they
yeah,
turn into something completely different. Maybe it's
Americans.
just they turn into Americans.
Yeah,
Maybe.
wild. Like I read this article in the New Yorker about Croatia and how they've ruined towns, these British guys.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And you think, how awful. And then you think,
Yeah.
well, we do that to Vegas or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
Vegas is kind of ruined, but other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah. Well, we're quite good at distracting. Just as human beings, we're good at distraction. So
Yeah.
the company that you're working for, you've been with them for quite a while now, a
Yeah.
few years. What do they think about your comedy? Presumably they know that you do this.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small company. I don't know. Like they're supportive of it as far as just like, there's a few people who, follow me on Instagram, or whatever, and they'll ask how it's going. I have some people who are actual friends that I've made at the company. And so they'll like when I was in Edinburgh, they'll send me a set and I'm like, well, it's about the same. I just did a little changes. Yeah, I want to see. And then they're like, no, it's way different. Or they've known
Oh,
me to they've known me like since I started doing it to now. And so they see a big change. And so that's kind of cool. I did do a set at one of our like online meetings during the pandemic, did like a little comedy set and kind of roasted a few people and nicely. I mean, it wasn't bad or anything in them. I've, I guess the skill set, like there's a sister company to ours that does this big meeting quarterly. And so I've compared that a few
Very
times now, and
cool.
that's been fun.
Mm.
Just a different voice at the meeting. So the people who are planning it and who they see every day aren't the only voices they hear. And so that's been pretty cool. But yeah, I think people are supportive.
So this is a really ignorant question, but at what point do comedians, because you're doing all these free gigs, presumably when
Mm,
you're starting out, at what point do you start earning money? And is it something that, you can conceivably make into a full-time career?
yeah. I mean, I know people who do it full time, either do stand-up comedy full time, or a lot of them piece together other things. Like they do writing, they do corporate events, and other things. They do workshops, they do like mentoring, or they do directing, they do a lot of different things, or they act like and then some people just make money just on comedy. But I think even with podcasting now, like they all like do that. And
Yeah.
I think it can just happen at different times for different people. It just depends, like you can do comedy for 8 or 10 years and not ever earn money, because that's just either you don't want to, or you just do your gigs you do. And then I know some people who, they get 10 quid a gig or whatever, or expenses, things like that. And then over time, I think it's a matter of getting a good tape, like having a good set recording, and then getting a good reputation, like you're consistent
Hmm.
and you can be relied on to show up and to do your job, which is make people laugh. And then if you're applying for like a 10-minute set that pays, you would want to send a 10-minute tape and you show them that you can do that. And sometimes they just want you to do that again.
Yeah.
But I'd say like the people I know, it's like between 1 and some people at 1 year, but I don't think they're earning a full living. I think around 5 or even 10 years, you start doing the full living, but like you can start getting paid a little bit. And some people will only always pay acts where they pay them like 5 quid a gig, but they always want to make sure they pay something.
Hmm.
Um, for me, like I just right now, I'm still going through my immigration process, so I'm not doing that and I'm not earning, but could I by now? Probably,
Hmm.
And so I think it's because I've been going almost 5 years. So yeah, it just varies. Making a full living, like my my IT salary, never, I don't know. I'm not sure. I
Well, you
mean,
never know. If Jimmy Carr can do it, and so can you.
yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, it varies.
Anything Jimmy can do, you can do.
That's cool. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, stick with that, Jimmy, but yeah.
Yeah. If somebody said to you, okay, you're going to get paid at least what you're being paid in your full-time job,
Right.
doing comedy full-time, is
Yeah,
that something that would appeal to you, or do you like the fact that
absolutely.
you're doing both?
No, I mean it would for sure. Like if it was secure. I mean, I worry about financial security and stuff, but yeah, totally. I mean, that would be the goal. And I don't think anyone who knows me wouldn't see that as a like okay. And I think if you have a good employer that sees you as a full human being, that they would be happy for you. Like even if
Hmm.
they're sad you would leave or something, they would be happy for you to pursue what you really want. And
Yeah.
even at my company, like I did marketing for a couple years until this redundancy thing happened, and which was totally just because of, company had to focus somewhere else, really. And that was just because my boss thought, oh, this would be a good fit for you to try out. It aligns with everything you do. You're
Hmm.
writing, you care, you get things done.
Hmm.
Let's try this. And so yeah, I mean, I think that you should never have to feel like you're stuck at a job that you don't want to be at if there's an opportunity you can take. I mean, a lot of times we have to be stuck at a job we don't want to be at because it's money.
Hmm.
And that's the reality. And I think like I'm I think old enough to be like influenced by the previous generation to go, just suck it up and work kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I really respect the generations after me who are not really doing that as much.
Yeah. Well, I
It's
mean,
kind
this
of
whole
scary.
podcast is about people who do decide, actually, I'm not going to continue doing what's making me miserable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pursue something that's actually going to make me happy. And it does tend to be people sort of middle-aged, between sort of 40 and 50. And
Yeah.
they've just had enough of the
Yeah.
9 to 5 daily grind. And I mean, that's what my coaching's all about. I think
Yeah.
Life's too short to be doing something that is making you miserable. But that's why I was really keen to showcase you and your story,
Yeah,
because I think if you do have something that you're really passionate about and you happen to be really good at, then it's
yeah,
worth exploring, isn't it? And my book, Ready to Quit Your Job, so I talk about the toe dipper, and that's somebody that is in probably full-time employment, who's been doing it for a while, and it's a necessity, right? Because we've all got bills and, we need to
yeah,
eat. um, and so it's really, the toe dipper is really that somebody that goes out there and pursues something that they think they might eventually be able to do as a full-time
yeah,
thing. And you're the perfect example of somebody that's doing that. So I'm so happy that you agreed to come on this
yeah,
podcast to share your story, to inspire
of
other
course.
people to, just give it a go. What's the worst that's going to happen?
That's generally how I feel. I firmly believe, and I've encouraged friends to do this. And I have a podcast that I started, kind of not the same thing, but similar idea and values, and just the idea that like my thing is like your self-worth is more than your job title. And it's because I saw a lot of friends lose a job for whatever reason and then feel like they couldn't do anything else. And it was just like ridiculous. Like you're super capable, you were somewhere for 10
Yeah,
years. There's this weird shift that has happened, I've seen happen, where when you start a job at first, you're excited, and then they're like, but you do feel like, oh, they're lucky to have me too. Like there's this mutual
totally.
thing.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden it gets to something happens where you're kind of lucky to have them. And then when you leave, you're like, well, what am I going to do? I can't succeed anywhere else. And I hate that. I hate when people feel like that. I hate when I felt like that.
mm,
I've had that recently where I'm just like total imposter syndrome again and stuff. And it's awful. But I think one thing comedy's done is given me something else to focus on in addition to work. And that's been really helpful to me. Um, and I think, yeah, if someone has something they want to do, like they want to paint, they want to draw, they want to do poetry, they want to do a sport, like whatever it is. Nothing has to be permanent or nothing has to be your full career ever, but it's something you do. Like I want to stand on stage and try to, I think I'm funny. I have a couple stories to tell. Maybe you're not a comic, maybe you're a storyteller. Or maybe you're a speaker and maybe there's an opportunity at your company to speak that you didn't see. There's just different ways of doing different things. And for me, a big thing I do outside of all this is nonprofit work and volunteering. But there I just get to like talk to customers and help out. It's for crisis, so they help, with homelessness. And yeah, it's just a chance for me to do stuff. But then there's all different ways to help people and do stuff. And I think like even that's a way in. So I just don't think that anyone has to sit and like not in some way do what they want to do.
yeah.
I strongly feel that. And I've talked to people I know about it all the time and try to encourage them because it's so important. So like you doing this podcast is important because someone might hear this, maybe this one or another episode and be like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And just go do
It
it.
it strikes me that you've got the whole yin yang thing going on in your life. So you've got this, the quite serious
Yeah.
job. And if you look at Rabia's LinkedIn profile, it's all very professional, and you have an amazing CV.
Yeah.
And then you go on Rabia's Instagram, and it's like, it's all about the comedy. But then
Yeah.
you also have this volunteer work, which, like you say, it's serious stuff. You're dealing with
Yeah.
crises, and you seem to have this like incredible balance going on in your life. Is this a deliberate thing, or is it
Yeah.
something that has just sort of happened?
Yeah. I feel like I'm just too honest with you, but yeah, no, it's deliberate because
Honesty is a good
I,
thing.
yeah, it is. So I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 19. Okay. So it's been over 20 years now. I'm
Can you
45.
explain very briefly what multiple
Sure.
sclerosis is for
Yes.
anybody who's listening who doesn't really know?
Yeah. So it's a neurological condition. It's an autoimmune disease that affects the central nervous system. So basically, around our nerves, like including brain tissue, but also down our spine, we have this coating around each nerve that's called myelin. It's kind of like if you look at your power cord and when it kind of frays, you see the wires exposed. And so it's autoimmune. So your white blood cells attack the myelin at some point, eat it away, scars form, and that can affect how the communication happens down the nerve. And so then that it can affect various aspects of your body and your mind. And so it can, the symptoms are just so diverse. I mean, it's kind of like it can be anything. So I've lost vision in my right eye before because of it. And it came
Wow.
back pretty much. And then I'll have a lot of like neuropathy or like tingling and stuff in my hands and feet, and like it can affect your cognition. I'm really lucky that that's the one thing I'm trying to hold on to, I guess, and can affect your walking. And um I'm just thinking of stuff it's affected for me, but it can affect just all different aspects of your health. And it's different for everyone. I mean, it's kind of like if you want to be unique and have a an illness, get that one because that one will do that for you. But
Right.
yeah, so I got it when I was 19, and that was difficult for me because, well, first of all, the internet was a lot different then. So you didn't have as much information. Treatments were different. There are like over 20 treatments now. There were three at the time.
Wow.
And just the knowledge about it was different. And but I think what it did was it gave me a cause. And I didn't handle the news. I mean, I don't know if I handled it well or not. Like it's hard to judge a 19-year-old getting news like that. But I handled it the way I did. And I've dealt with on the side, whether it's related or not, depression quite a bit, severely sometimes. And I think those things and then losses in my life and stuff all made me kind of realize like for me, I need purpose. And I think a strong purpose for me, even since before that mess and when I was young, was just like to serve others, wherever that drive came from. And so I honor that by doing the different charity stuff. So I do stuff for MS Society. Um, there's another organization called Overcoming MS in the States. It was the MS Society. I did work for Shatterproof, which is around alcohol and opioid addiction. But what I try to do is kind of turn my pain or whatever into like something productive.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always take care of myself 100%. So there's definitely like gaps in that. But I feel like if I'm acting with purpose and intention, then I'm doing better.
Yeah.
And and I have a lot. Like I'm thankful. I'm allowed a lot. I've had this disease for 20 years and I'm pretty much fine. Like most people wouldn't know if I didn't say anything. And that's because people have dedicated their lives to helping people like me, probably. And so I just think it's so important to like for me to do that. And then yeah, as a balance, yeah, I mean I could exercise more and eat better. So those are the things I want to work on. But I also like and I also know that I stay too busy sometimes. And so what I'm trying to do now is understand that rest and like quiet is also important. And I
Mm-hmm.
broke my leg in May, and
Oh
that kind of
no. How did you
made me
manage
do
that?
that. That was I fell down some stairs at a gig. So
Ouch.
yeah. But NHS, luckily, right?
Yeah.
But that made me slow down. And I was burning the candle at both ends for like 2 or 3
Mm.
months. And so it was
Mm.
actually like a blessing, I suppose. But
These
yeah,
things happen for a reason sometimes, don't they? It's like the
they
universe
do, and I
going,
think
you
it
know what, you
did.
need to just slow down for a bit.
It happened for a reason. I got COVID at Edinburgh and I ended up quitting my show. And I think that happened for a reason. It just wasn't a healthy work environment for me. It's funny how comedy can also be, you can have a very toxic work environment in
Mm.
comedy. And so I think for me, like there's a couple key things and I do a lot on purpose. And I think I just try to like, I try to make sure that I do some kind of service that's important to me. I do my work. I try to be a good colleague to everyone. That's in work or in comedy. But I do my I try to at least one gig a week, but this week it is one gig. Next week it's like three. And then, hopefully I take care of myself in the process as well. That's the part I don't do as well. But yeah, I think it's important.
Well, you can't be a perfect human being, you know. We
No.
all we all have things that we that we need to improve. It'd be
Yeah.
boring, wouldn't it? I mean, if you didn't have anything that you need to improve on, what's the point?
Yeah. I know. I mean, I have a pile of books telling me how to improve that I haven't read.
I don't think
You
it
know,
works through osmosis. I don't know. I keep trying.
I'll sleep on a book and be like,
Mm, that'd be quite cool. It's probably what's going to happen one day, isn't it? There'll be a chip
yeah.
that you just insert and you'll just know everything. You'll know how to speak Mandarin overnight.
Can you imagine?
That'd be quite cool, wouldn't it? It'll probably go that way, won't it?
I know.
being a comedian, do you find that people like if you tell people you do stand-up comedy, do people expect you to just be like really funny and then they're just almost disappointed if you're not doing one line after one line after one liner?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like if I don't tell them, if I make people laugh for a while and then I tell them I'm a comedian, they go, "Oh, I knew it." But if I somehow say I'm a comedian and then a lot of times they'll be like, "Oh, tell me a joke."
Mm,
And I go, "No, I'm not working." That's what I usually say. "No, I'm off work right now." Because it's like, no, I don't have jokes just to tell. I mean, I do in a way, or I'll tell them a pun because those are easy to tell. Like, I'm not going to tell you a story for 5 minutes. And so, but yeah, sometimes people are like, "Oh, it's not that funny." And it's like, well, okay. I mean, you don't know what to do. And it's like, it's kind of like if I go, "What do you do?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm a solicitor." I'm like, "Oh, okay, here's a legal matter I'm looking at. Can you do this right now?" It's
yeah.
weird,
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? Or
It's
even if they're an
totally weird.
actor, "Oh, can you do this?"
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it happens, and then there is pressure to be funny. And then, but you don't want to be that person. Like, I don't want to always be funny. I want
No.
to go to a funeral and be like, "Oh, hey everyone," this crowd's dead or whatever. I mean, it's terrible. you know.
What do you think your brother would think of what you're doing now? You said that you are sort of doing it to honor him.
Yeah, I mean, with him, my grandma, like I'll do jokes about my grandma that are fun. They're not making fun of her really. They're just like about her. She was
Hmm.
really cool. And then my brother, I haven't gotten to very much yet because that's hard. I have one, I've mentioned him now on stage this time in Edinburgh, like just to get to this one joke. But I think he'd think it's cool, you
Hmm.
know? I mean, we laughed a lot. Like,
Was he funny?
yeah, he was funny. I mean, I don't know if we're all funny in different ways. I mean, just my mom will say, that we would just crack, like he would just do something, I'd just be in pieces. And I remember we used to get in trouble at the dinner table. I remember this one Thanksgiving, we got sent away from the table, and then we called my grandma and told on my mom for sending us away. My grandma called
And
my
then what
mom.
happened? Did your mum get grounded?
Yeah, then my grandma called my mom, and then my mom had us come back. But like my brother would do stuff just I mean, the dinner table was kind of for us, like sometimes be funny. Like he would just have mashed potatoes. He would always like pick up the whole pile and pretend to eat it and just stupid.
Like proper slapstick.
Yeah, or he would our rooms. So I shared a room with my sister, and then he had the room next door, and he would fart against the wall. We're like early teens, and we would watch movies. Like Tommy Boy was one of our favorite movies to watch together, and I wish he could see me do it. I wish my uncle could see me because I think he would get
Mm,
a kick out of it. I mean, there are things that when you lose someone, there's that loss of that time you have, but then there's also these future things that like you don't even know you're gonna wish, "Oh, I wish you could see that,"
yeah.
and then depending on what you believe, they are seeing it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I believe he sees it, but like maybe he does. I have no idea. But I think it's fun if you can mention someone on stage or
Hmm.
have a secret nod to them that you know about, and that's kind of sweet. Um, and just the thought about someone is nice
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Definitely. What do your parents make of your comedy?
So my mom's funny because she goes, "I don't like comedy, Robbie, but I'm glad you're doing it." She
What does
doesn't,
that mean?
yeah, because she says she
I don't
doesn't
like to
laugh.
laugh.
She doesn't laugh, and she does laugh. I make her laugh, but
Hmm.
not necessarily with comedy. I mean, I'll tell her, I'll run bits by her because she kind of, "Oh, mom, I wrote this thing. I said this." And she goes, "Oh," and kind of laughs. But she's not like, if she goes and sits in a comedy show, she's not going to be the one laughing really loud. She just doesn't like, I laugh really loud. I might have taken it in the womb. Like maybe she used to laugh when she was like 25 and I came along when she was 26. She stopped. I don't know. She laughs and she smiles, but she just isn't uninhibited about it. So she just
Right.
kind of goes, "I'm glad you're doing it." Like I think when I first started doing it, no one thought it was serious, right? But now I think everyone takes it seriously as I do.
Hmm.
Um, and then my dad doesn't really say, but my mom will tell him what I did. And he'll be like, "Oh, that's cool." So it's kind of, I mean, they attended one of my Zoom gigs, which is pretty cool because like to figure out the whole thing. But during the lockdown, there were these gigs on Zoom. And so
Yeah.
they went to one of those and liked it, and that was cool, you know. So I don't think that I think if I didn't do it, they'd be fine too.
Right. And they're like, either way, it's
Yeah,
great.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I
my
mean,
mom would be, that
does
would be
that apply to your day job as well? That they're just like, okay, whatever.
yeah. I mean,
Mm.
my mom, it's pretty cool, my mom, because she's really, I mean, like they own an auto repair shop. My dad's a mechanic and they owned a shop together. And so the whole IT thing, I mean, actually my dad does pretty well like figuring out different apps and stuff. And my mom does too. And they just don't, it wasn't a natural thing for them because they're,
Mm.
in their 70s and 80s, but now, but my mom will like understand what I do. Like I'll show her, and sometimes she's like, I can tell she's tuning me out, but she also will talk about now like the UI of a website and stuff. So it's kind of cool. I think parents, I don't know what I've seen with my parents or my mom is who I'm closest to, is they just want you to be okay.
Mm.
That's the thing. And so
Yeah.
I think that's what's important. And
Yeah.
so I think she wouldn't be happy if I went and worked in a bookstore or something right now. But I think if that was the right thing for me to do and I was
Mm.
able to take care of myself whenever, she'd be okay.
Yeah.
And I say bookstore because I want to work in a bookstore when I'm older. When I
Yeah, me
retire, I feel like I
too.
want to work
Should
in a
we run a
bookstore.
bookstore together?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to work in my uncle
Yeah,
worked in a bookstore and I want to work in a
amazing.
bookstore, but
Yeah,
I also know that like I just always think that'd be like so ideal, just working in a bookstore.
yeah, me
I
too.
love
Just
them,
surrounded by books all day.
but it'd be a lot different than my current job. So that's why I mention it versus, anything else.
Well, that can be your third career. Why not?
Yeah. And I want to work like at the Hollywood Bowl. So I always love that venue.
Now that would be my worst nightmare. Awful. Speaking of which, what does success mean to you now? What's your
Oh,
definition?
I mean, it's hard because I think there's something about financially having a lot of money or something, but I think um for me it's really just I guess thinking about at the end of the day, what am I going to leave? And I one thing I'm confident about is like the people I love know I love them. I have no doubt. So if any day I go, if that would happen way too early, I know that the people I love know I love them. And that's important to me.
Mm,
I think being able to take care of myself, whatever that looks like, if it looks like the flat I'm currently in, which, I like in Camden, or if it's living back in the States, or if it's living in the country, which I doubt would happen just because I'm a city person, and just doing work I'm proud of, whatever that work is. I think that's what it is, right? And I mean, there's goals I have, but those aren't necessarily success. I mean, then there's success on each goal, but overall success, that's what it is to me. Just being a person I'm proud of, really.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And then
awesome.
if it's being famous, that's fine or something, but I
Well,
don't know
maybe
that.
you will be famous one day.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows indeed. And maybe you will be a full-time comedian who also has a bookstore and you just spend your time doing those two things.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Hmm.
Actually. I would like that.
Let's talk about the name things. Obviously, you have an unusual, well, I think it's an unusual name, at least in England, it's
Yeah.
an unusual name, Rabia. And before we hit record, we were talking about, I mean, my name's Yeshim and I get called all sorts, usually Yasmin,
Yeah.
which is fine, and I could think of much worse things to be called. Um, but it was interesting because I was speaking to a recruitment agent a couple of days ago and she was saying that it's thankfully not a very common thing, but there are some companies where they would rather not hire people or they won't even interview people who don't have an English name. So I
Yeah.
was wondering how you find, like, have you ever faced anything like that in
Yeah.
your line of work or?
Well, so there's this whole idea now. Well, not now. I mean, it's been the last few years, but now with AI, it's helping it along of anonymizing CVs. And so when they come into a company, they'll remove the name, the years, sometimes like
Yeah,
actual years,
yeah,
because it could show you're old or young,
yeah.
and things like that. And that's
And the
on purpose.
university and the school that you went to
Yeah.
even. Yeah,
All these things that can create unconscious bias, they'll remove.
yeah.
And so have I faced it? Well, so my last name, Coon, is actually my stepdad's last name. So I changed my name when I was like around 21 or something. My
Oh,
brother wanted to change his last name because we didn't really know our dad, etc. There's a big thing around that,
okay.
our biological dad, um and so he wanted me to do it, so I did. So I did lose like this part of my ethnic identity, I suppose, because the last name was Makluta.
Mm-hmm.
It's Makhlouta, and now it's Coon. And
Mm-hmm.
it was weird though. I had a hyphenated name in university because when I was in elementary school, you can just put whatever name for a kid. And so I had Coon because just of stuff, and it was just easier to have my, stepdad, who's really my dad. I mean, his
Mm.
last name, and all of us did. And then when I went to college or university, I had to hyphenate it because one thing was on my social security card
Oh,
and whatever. And so it was
yeah.
crazy. But anyway, I mean, I've had people, I think when I lived in Texas, it wasn't around a job, but like when I lived in Texas, like people had thought I was Muslim all the time because
Oh,
of an Arabic first name,
right.
and and would act like would make assumptions about me. And it was just weird. And look, Islamophobia is awful, and it definitely got worse after 9/11, which
Mm.
was quite a long time ago now.
Mm.
And I was living in Texas, what, 11 or 12 years after that. But I would say like I got talked to in a certain way until I had to clear it up. And then I have to say I'm Christian, which was really weird because I don't really consider myself that, but I was baptized Greek Orthodox. And it's just like super weird. But it was all because of my name,
Yeah.
you know?
Why
And
do
so
you have an Arabic name?
I'm half Lebanese. My dad was from
Oh,
Lebanon.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, um, yeah, there's a weird thing about having two ethnicities, but then also like having not really grown up with
Mm.
the parent that would be the more, non-white one, I guess, or something, however you want
Yeah.
to say, the
Yeah.
non-Anglo one. But yeah, and so I would get treated differently because of that. And then um in high school there was a weird thing because we had the last name Coon and it was spelled differently, but there was this Rodney King. In LA, there was this racial basically beating of this man by police a long time ago. This is well before George Floyd. Definitely
Mm.
a horrible incident, and the leading officer was Sergeant Coon. And so we had people
No
think we were
way.
his kids, and that was weird. So there was stuff around our names, not the same that you're talking about, but different. But I
Mm.
do think people make assumptions about people's names, and I do know they won't hire people for certain things like that. They'll look at their name and say, "Well, I don't want that kind of person working here," whatever that kind of person is.
Yeah, whatever that might be. Yeah.
Yeah. And then not saying people's names correctly. I mean, not asking you how to say their name. And I will just not correct someone after a while. Like I'll correct them and then I'll just stop because it's too much for me. And
Yeah.
then I have a joke about my name being pronounced incorrectly. And there's this one MC who still says it incorrectly. And he's heard this joke like 10 times. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you just have either I don't even know what to do with, so I just don't even tell him. Because I'm like, I just don't talk to him very much. So it's
Yeah.
fine. I
That's
can't deal
funny.
with it.
How does he say it out of interest?
Rabiah.
Rabiah.
What kind of name is that? Like, why do you even think that's a name? I mean, sorry if there's a Rabiah out there, but come on.
Yeah, you've just insulted all the Rabiahs in the world.
Yeah. I'm like, why is your name Rabiah? But it's not mine. And yeah, it's like Rabiah, Arabia, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But you're right, it get after a while it just gets embarrassing to like I've known you for 5 years and I'm just not gonna correct you now.
Yeah.
I've had a colleague in the past that called me Yesim for several years. And I was like, I don't know, like I'll say my name, like in conversation, I'll say my own name in front of him
Yeah.
and then maybe he'll pick it up and he wouldn't. And then it became a bit of a joke. So then I was like getting other colleagues to say my name in front of him. So it might, it might filter in at some point, but I think it was a good 4 or 5 years where I just called him
Yeah.
Yashim. And I was like, well, do you know what? Like, it's not, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's like he was trying,
Yeah, probably.
but it was like weird. Like, what are you
Yeah,
doing? Yeah, so
yes,
weird.
yeah,
Or else be like, just call me Robbie. Like, don't like just if it's
yeah.
too many syllables, don't do it.
Just shorten it, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you and to hear the funny side and sometimes the toxic side of comedy
Yeah.
and to hear how you're getting on with it. It'll really make my day at some point in the future if I see your name emblazoned across the Apollo. And I'll definitely be one of your cheerleaders for sure.
Thank you.
I'll be
Yeah.
like, she was on my podcast.
Oh
She
my.
owes it all to me. And I really wish you all the very, very best with
Yeah.
your new role in your corporate career
Thank
and
you.
with whatever happens in your bookstore, comedy club, beer drinking place.
Thank you.
Please
Yeah.
serve coffee as well, because I'm not a big beer drinker.
Yeah, you need coffee
Is
too.
that okay? That would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks.
Thanks again for your time. Really
Sure.
appreciate it.